Welcome back to the Lending Pulse. Today's guest is Amit Dhir, better known as RADHIR Realty. Realtor at Remax Millennium, he's built a strong reputation in both residential and commercial real estate, closing high potential investment deals like gas stations, plazas, and rental income properties. Amit is known for his aggressive yet honest approach, deep market insight, and strong negotiation skills. We'll cover his journey, strategies, branding, market insights, and his visions for the future. Amit, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Drew. Thank you for having me.
Let's jump right into it. How did you first get started in real estate?
So I was actually in the food industry before I got into real estate, and working long hours. I remember during COVID, it was like an absolute, crap show. Like I was working 7 days a week, 20 hours days. I won't name the company I was working for, but right after COVID, they laid me off saying there was no growth. And then after that, I decided, I'm just going to start doing stuff on my own. And that's when I got to real estate, and I've never looked back.
Those are some long hours. That's like 20 hours. Huh?
Yeah.
Not a lot of people can work that hard, let alone most of these realtors, right? When we clock out after 2 hours. What made you choose the name RADHIR Realty?
Well, it's, and a lot of people ask me this. As you know, Dhir is our last name, and RA is my parents' initials. So, being from a Indian background, gotta have those parents and their influence, and
Absolutely.
Respect them as well. So that's how we came up with that name.
What was the first deal that really put you on the map?
I think in the thing with commercial, and that's what I like about commercial, is all the deals are different. And one that put me out there was it was funny. A client called me. And they wanted to buy 10 acres of farmland. And when when he first approached me, he said, look, we're working with 3 other realtors. No one's finding us anything that we're looking for. You give it a shot. Very first property I sent them, they said, yeah, it looks good. We'll go take a look at it. I went up there and I wanted to talk to the city. I was up there about 2 hours before the showing. And it was funny, the lady at the city comes up to me and she goes, your clients aren't going to be doing marijuana on the farm, are they?
Yeah.
And I'm like, no. Like, why would you even ask a question like that?
Right.
And she's like, well, up in this area, a lot of the farms here do legally grow marijuana for the government. And I was like, oh, wow. And so I called on my clients. I said, look, guys, I'm really sorry, but I didn't know this. And I'd asked the listing agent before as well, what was going on the farm. And she wasn't very clear on what was happening. So I called my clients and said, guys, look, I'm really sorry. I am here already, and I know you're on the way, but, just so you know, they are growing marijuana on the farm. And so my clients like, you know what, let's just take a look at it. Let's see. They came up. They absolutely loved the property. The setup was absolutely, I learned so much, with the greenhouses. It was nice and heated. Yeah. And that client has turned into multiple, other deals for me. Because, like I said, they were working for two or three other agents. Yeah. Couldn't find them what they wanted. The first listing I sent them, they loved it, and then
what was the difference there? You met for initial consultation. How'd you go about it?
Yeah, I think it was just listening to my clients,
listening
to exactly what it was that they were looking for. I know a lot of agents will just set it into their criteria, and they just keep sending listings and listings. Yeah. I actually take the time of looking at it and seeing if it matches my client's criteria, and it's exactly what they're looking for before I send it off to them.
Yep. Marijuana on a commercial scale, that can be okay. I've seen a lot of cases, even back in the day, let's say, before it was legal in Canada, it can stigmatize a property, to grow marijuana. So, in a commercial setting, does it still stigmatize the property?
And that's what I thought at that time.
Yeah.
But when my clients looked at it, they actually want to grow lettuce. So that's what they're doing on it now.
Right.
But the setup for the marijuana was actually ideal for what it was that they needed it for. Yeah. So it actually worked out in the end for me. And that's what I originally thought. And that's when I learned that, sometimes taking those negatives, and I think we feel that it might stigmatize the property. But when I called my clients and I asked them, they still looked at it. They fell in love with it. So I think sometimes we think that it'll stigmatize the property, but in the end, it actually worked out into my favor.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. You've done a few gas stations and plaza sales as well. So why focus on the gas stations and plazas?
I think gas stations again. It's a good. A lot of folks out there now they're not happy with the current job market, as you know, with the labor market that's going on now. So I think a lot of people are looking to get into into their own business, do stuff for themselves. One of my hashtags that I do on mine is fire your boss. So people can start working for themselves, become entrepreneurs. And I think with gas stations, it's an easy business to run. It's still stressful, and it's like with any business out there, all businesses are stressful. My dad was a businessman. I grew up around businesses all the time. All businesses are stressful. I'm not saying that some businesses are easier than others, but still, I think with gas stations, you have the convenience store aspect, you have the gas aspect. You can also build on there with a lot of the gas stations now. They do have like the branding inside. You'll have a pizza or a Popeyes inside. So I think that's what makes those attractive.
What do you think about like the electrical market? You think it's going to kill the gas stations or the mandates?
I drive an electric vehicle, and I have been, and I thought that, but I think the thing with gas products is I don't think even though I know the government has a timeline for these vehicles, I think that gasoline market will still be there. I think a lot of folks, and there is no infrastructure out there yet a lot for the electrical market. Like I said, as with me driving an electric vehicle myself, I don't find that you'll find a gas station at every corner.
Yeah.
I don't find a charging station at every corner. Yes, there is, but they're the slow chargers. There's no fast chargers. Especially with me, I drive a Hummer EV, and it takes a long time to charge. And the issue I have is trying to find a charger that will charge my vehicle faster. Yeah.
It's questionable because the Canadian government, like let's say even by 2035, if they want to put in a mandate to make all the vehicles electric, do we even have the infrastructure to charge these vehicles?
Absolutely not.
Even on a commercial basis. And there was one case where, we built these ferries. We had two giant electric ferries, and a few years later we realized, we need to plug these ferries in. We need to charge these ferries, right? How do you feel about the way that the market is shifting in terms of transportation?
Again, the government has to do a lot more, has to build that infrastructure for electric vehicles to be sustainable. Until they do that, I think a lot of folks, and that's what scares a lot of folks to go to an electric vehicle, is the infrastructure is not there. So as far as, yes, I know they have this mandate, but I'm sure that they will be changing that because I don't think the government has done enough to really build that infrastructure to have it. I am dealing with someone sort of on the side, and they are sort of trying to bring in the electrical and the solar panels, but I still don't think that that's quite enough for us to completely be reliable on electric.
Yeah, it feels like markets are starting to shift toward the United States, right? So how do you feel about like the future growth of Canada and investment in the country?
I think the Canada is still strong. I think with the leadership that we have they are sort of pushing back on Trump, and they are showing that yes, we don't have to rely on the U.S. as much. Even though yes, I know being born and raised here in Canada, I know that we do rely on our neighbors to the south a lot. But I think over the years, Canada's really established itself that we don't have to rely on them too much, and I'm glad that we are pushing back on Trump and sort of showing them that, you can't walk all over us. And so I think that's something that makes me proud. And I think Canada still has a long way to go, but I think we're in the right direction to, for our future growth that's coming up.
That ties into my next question is, where are you still finding value in Canadian commercial real estate today?
I think a lot of folks still want to invest in Canada. I think it is an attractive market. I think our government has to do more on, who it is that we're bringing into the country. I do have a friend that is in the immigration market, and there's nothing out there for businesses. They always talk to me about they have got clients where they want to come into Canada, they want to open up businesses, they want to hire Canadian workers, but there's no program for people in the States or even UK for that matter to come over and open up their businesses. And I think the government really needs to look at that. Hey, look, Canada can't really survive on 30, 40 million people population. We do need to grow our population, but I think the government needs to be smart on who it is that they're bringing into the country and start opening up to a lot of these business clients. I don't agree with this foreigners tax that we have. I do get a lot of inquiries from overseas from folks that want to invest money here, but then the foreigners tax scares them off because,
Right.
and those are the people that want to invest in the money. They're there to grow our economy. They're going to hire Canadian employees, but the government is instead, punishing them for investing money in Canada, which I absolutely feel is something that they need to seriously take a look at.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of large corporations can get away with, paying taxes here in Canada. And even our digital corporations, we have them come in like companies like Facebook, Meta, Instagram, YouTube, right? There's a large revenue source of advertising being paid to these corporations, right? Are we getting our fair share? Are we taxing large corporations? But coming back to the real estate side, where does private financing make sense for your clients?
Private financing, sometimes, it is, especially when it comes to land deals, when we're looking at places that they want to build hotels. Another thing that I find now, the growth that I'm seeing is a lot of folks want to build these senior homes. That's, I think, a lot where the banks aren't funding those kinds of deals because I think the bank sort of looks at, they want to have an asset on the property. So I think that's where a lot of the private funding is coming in from, especially where a lot of the clients that I've dealt with. That's where we sort of have to look as the private funding, where we're looking to build, a big hotel or a big retirement home. I think that's where a lot of the private funding is coming from.
Speaking of these retirement homes, a lot of them came under the gun around COVID time. We saw a bunch of practices that were questionable. Nurses understaffed, underpaid. Some of the living conditions of the people were questionable. Is this still a good investment today?
100%, Drew. I think yes. The reason why we had that was a lot of our systems are strained with the budgets that they do receive, and as I was saying, we can't really survive on that 30 to 40 million population. We do need to increase our population. Again, population pays taxes. That is what's going to help fund our hospitals. That's what's going to help fund our senior homes. It is the lack of funding, and that's where I come in from. And I know a lot of folks are going to push back and say, immigration is already at an issue. But what I said is we need to have the proper immigration in place, not where just any Tom, Dick, and Harry can come in. We need to have the proper immigration where we get the right people that come in that are paying the taxes to help fund these.
It seemed like we did have a system at one point where, we would credit people based on merit, education, financial background. And now it seems like, through the education system, it was a massive loophole, right? People were coming in on a basis of education, but their true priority was to, become a citizen of the country, right? It was never about going to school here. It was never about, and even if you were coming to school here, what are the trades that you've done? You come to school for 1 or 2 years, you've done your bare minimum, and now you're going back to work a general position or labor position, right? It's not like we're coming and we're seeing people come here to become doctors or engineers or civil servants or lawyers. They're coming in, and then we're seeing such an influx of, where is the jobs for Canadians that need to grow, right? It's getting hard for our people. How do you feel about, the immigration policies of, how we're of an over influx of people?
Yeah, I mean, you know what? Again, it's going back to the funding. And I think our government was so underfunded on trying to sort of look at these applications that were coming in for the immigration. I think Canada does need the immigration. Again, going back to its proper, yes, I think the government sort of opened up the floodgates, and I think a lot of these colleges and universities did take advantage. They were charging these students like 3-4 times, and it was all a business, right? And so then they made tons of money.
It was Conestoga College. They had 22,000 foreign students compared to around like 3,000 that were actual local Canadians, right? And
Exactly.
they went on for a few years, right? And their revenue is like in hundreds of millions of dollars, right?
Yep.
So it's more of a business over education. Coming back to immigration policies, where do you feel like the countries or the types of people or the education standards that we need?
I think we do need to leave it open up to a lot of these business folks that are out there. Like I said, a friend of mine, he has an immigration firm. He has a lot of clients that own businesses that want to come to Canada, but the government doesn't have any programs there for them. It's funny, I'm going to go back to our friend in the South there. When he was running to get into power again, a lot of his stuff that he said was anti-immigrants, right? That I'm going to build a wall, we're going to stop the immigration. But what's the one first thing that he did? He introduced that gold card, right? And he realizes as well, we do need that immigration to come in. We do need that immigration to come in and invest the money in our country. I think it's still something that our government needs to look at. And I think they're looking at it and the policies are changing there.
Yeah.
I think that's one thing that we need to look at is attracting a lot of the businesses that are overseas, having them come here, open up offices, open up branches here,
Right.
and start using Canadian labor. That would really help out with our Canadian, our laborers, create more jobs. And I think as well, where right now people are desperate and they're just grabbing anything. I think for the C&E coming up this year, there's 5,000 positions and they had 55,000 people apply.
Yeah.
Like that is a concern, man. Like that is huge. And that's what a lot of people say, oh, you know what? Tim Hortons, I can't get a job. McDonald's, I can't, because people are desperate. We open up the floodgates. A lot of folks come in, but I think if we track a lot of these business folks to come in, a lot of these companies to come in and invest in Canada would really help alleviate a lot of these labor shortages that we have.
What's like the biggest mistake that you see new investors in commercial real estate making?
Not actually doing their due diligence. I mean, a lot of folks come in and you know what, they just rely on family or they rely on, I think it's really looking at those numbers. A lot of folks don't realize that when you're doing residential is a lot of, emotion. And you're looking at, okay, does this room fit? With businesses, you got to take a look at a different stance. You need to take a look at those numbers, see if those numbers make sense. Take the time to do your due diligence. I see a lot of folks lack on that, and I'm sort of just always pushing my clients, saying, you know what, have you looked at this? Have you looked at that? Yeah, you know what, it is a long contract, but it's a long contract for a reason, because it's there to protect you. And I think getting the right help, getting a proper lawyer to take a look at that document or that deal will speak volumes and does really help you in the long run.
So what tools or checklists do you use to keep clients focused on the numbers and not emotions?
A lot of it is actually doing your homework. And a lot of these franchises out there now, they are cheaper to buy. But really what it is that you're doing is you're buying yourself a job, right? It's only going to replace that $50,000, $60,000 job that you have out there. And a lot of folks don't realize. Actually, I was watching a video just this morning about someone investing in a Five Guys or a Burger King. The investment was the same. It was about $50,000 more in the Burger King. But when he looked at it, he said Burger King offers a lot more products to sell so that they can build up. And after a year, he was already opening up his third location, where the gentleman with Five Guys was still busy building up his brand. And I think we just look at the numbers sometimes and we don't realize that extra $50,000 means you're actually getting into a brand that has a lot more to offer and will help you build and succeed a lot more.
Just because you personally eat at Five Guys over Burger King doesn't mean it's going to do better for your portfolio.
Exactly, and that's where the emotions come in, right? And that's, again, a lot of folks are, well, I'm loyal to that brand and I go to that brand. Chick-fil-A is another one. They're coming into Canada.
Right.
Like I said, I used to work in the food industry. So
Chick-fil-A tastes amazing.
No, it does, but you're not actually an owner, right? And you're investing, and so that's why I said a lot of these franchises now, you're just buying a job, and that's exactly what Chick-fil-A is doing. Is that you have to be a single owner, you can't have any family members on there, you can't open up another location. As to where McDonald's, they entice you. You know what? We want you to open up multiple locations. We're giving you, 10 locations or 15 locations. We want to see you succeed. So I think spending that, but a lot of people look at, well, I don't have the $700,000 capital, right? But that $700,000 is going to help you grow. I've never seen a McDonald's franchisee saying, "Oh my God, it was a bad month." But a lot of these franchises that are selling for 250, 300,000, they're still struggling sometimes, and they're, "Oh yeah, I don't know how I'm going to pay the rent this month. I don't know." So I think sometimes we need to take a look at the bigger picture and see what's better for us, and maybe that little bit more of an investment will help us grow in the future.
Yeah, McDonald's is like a long-term investment that it does well. It costs a reason. There's a reason for why it costs what it costs. So speaking to some new commercial agents trying to tap into the industry, what's the type of social content that brings you the most serious leads?
It's funny with commercial, as long as you have the right product to sell. And I've been lucky, and that's what I've seen, that as long as the product that someone is looking for, they will contact you. And I've been lucky with that a lot of my listings, a lot of my deals that I've done has been a lot of stuff. I just picked up a couple listings this weekend, where there are restaurants in Vaughan. And I've been getting a lot of inquiries about them. I already have a lot of showings booked. As long as you see the value and the quality in there.
How do you make that stand out? Because you could have a Subway for sale, and there could be 100 Subways also. How do you make that listing stand out compared to the other commercial listings?
I take a look at it, and exactly like you said, is there 100 Subways out there for sale?
Right.
Why is it that folks are selling that? Right? And I take a look at, is it a unique product that my clients are going to want? As I said, a lot of businesses out there, people bought it just, to replace their jobs, and now they're finding it hard because they don't have that business background. They didn't do the proper due diligence.
Right.
I take a look at it. Is this something that will make my clients money in the long run? Again, I'm not here for a, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, one deal thing. I'm here for the long term. Like I said, that client with the marijuana farm, he understood that I was there for him. He understood my concern. I've done 3 or 4 other deals. I have another listing with that client right now. So that's what I look for. Is when I sell this business, will that client be happy that I sold it to them? Or am I going to have to avoid that client saying, yeah, you know what, I sold it, I just want to make my commission, and I'm going to back out. I think with commercial, you can't really do that. You have to look at the long term. So I think really selling your client and really talking to them. I'll get offers sometimes on my listings, and I know it's not a commercial agent because they aren't really protecting their client. And I'll call them up and I say, look, you need to put this in your offer. You need to put this clause, because again, if you don't put it in, your client's walking into something that they're not going to be happy. And they appreciate that, right? And a lot of agents won't do that though. They're just like, yeah, let's just close this deal. Let's make the money. Who cares about the client? It's the other person's client. But I think that in commercial real estate, you really need to look at that and especially build that long-term relationship.
So speaking to some of those newer commercial agents, what's a tip for those agents looking to break into the commercial real estate market?
There isn't really much to it. I think with commercial, a lot of folks come in thinking it's the same as residential, where it's a copy and paste, and mostly a lot of the residentials are the same. With commercial, you have to realize that every single deal you do is different. And so you need to take a look at what is it that the due diligence that my client needs to do, what are the clauses that I need to put in there. And I think once you get to understand that and really, I'm not saying that it's hard and I've never, I think it's a great field to be in. It's very lucrative, but you have to be prepared that a lot of the deals do take longer to do. But there are a lot, there are a lot more, you can make a lot more than doing residential sales, but it will take a long time. So you need to do your homework and really need to know what it is that you're doing.
I think the real question is, if you decide to start doing commercial, can you pay your bills for the next 6 months? Can you pay your bills for the next 2 years without having to see a check coming in? Do you have other deals going on? If you can't sustain that, if you can't sustain your business practice, then it does take time to do these commercial files, right? And you might get burned. And some of them don't end up closing, right? I've had guys that have been in the market for over 6 years. They're just waiting for that perfect opportunity, right? Those are some of the investors you're going to meet. Where do you see Ontario's commercial market in the next 5 years?
I'd really like to see it grow. As we talked about previously, as long as the government, does start help bringing in a lot of the folks. I think the Canadian commercial market is still strong. A a lot of folks out there still have that dream about owning their business. We do get a lot of calls about people wanting to open up their business. So I think that it is strong, it is there. It's just, are we attracting the right type of businesses, and are we selling the right type of businesses? And I think if we can sell more lucrative businesses, it'll really help it grow. A lot of the businesses out there are lucrative, and it comes down to, like I said before, just checking your numbers.
Where do you think the interest rates are heading in the next 5 years?
Well, definitely, I think it's going to start improving, and I think the government sees that. Even our friends to the south, I was reading this morning that they're going to start lowering as well. Definitely, they are heading in the right direction. I just don't think it's as quick as we'd like to see, but at least we're heading in the right direction.
Yeah. So housing supply is still falling short of demand. Where do you think the bottleneck really is?
I think the bottleneck is a lot of in our red tape. A lot of these builders that I've spoken to, they say there's a lot of red tape that they need to go through, and I think the governments need to work. Governments, I mean, like the municipal, the provincial, the federal government really needs to work with each other to help eliminate the red tape so that these builders can start building.
Right. You answered my next question. My next question was, are government development fees and red tape slowing projects more than market conditions?
Definitely. I mean, it's funny. It's the same government that's screaming, that we're in a housing crisis, but yet they're not doing anything to eliminate that red tape that they've created. I think once we can help eliminate that, it'll really help out with the housing crisis.
Right. Grocery and fuel prices are still high. Do you think the cost of living pressures are holding back real estate activity?
Of course, definitely. I mean, it's, if someone can't afford to even feed their family a week, it's hard to talk to them about real estate. And definitely we need to, and again, going back to what we were talking about, that, relying on our neighbors to the south, I think we need to attract those businesses where we're creating jobs in Canada, making more things in Canada, to help make it a little bit cheaper for the Canadian public will really help things in the long run.
Do you find that people are downsizing or?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's I think during COVID, a lot of folks bought houses that they're realizing that they really can't, it's too big for them. And we do see a little bit of folks starting to downsize. Not as much. People I think are still trying to find with the interest rates heading in the right direction. It's getting a little bit better, but yeah, we do often see where they're trying to downsize.
Yeah. Amit, thank you for sharing your journey, strategies, and market insight. This has been a masterclass in how to build a niche and dominate it. To our listeners, we've got another powerhouse lined up for our next episode, so you won't want to miss it. Make sure you follow, subscribe, and share so you're first to know when it drops. Until then, keep learning, keep growing, and most importantly, keep your finger on the pulse.